I am Amy Rivas. I am a double Bruin, really proud. I attended UCLA for undergrad and also for graduate school, and I obtained my master's in social work at UCLA in 2013. I'm really excited to be here. So I don't know anything about medical school, so I feel like I'm going to learn a lot. And I'm really eager to hear about your experience too, and also really proud to see folks that look like me in those kinds of positions. All right, so we're going to get started with a brief introduction. Our four panelists are incredible. Magali, if you could actually put the flyer that we sent out into the chat so folks can download it as a file if they want to, but that has an extensive overview of everyone's background and professional experiences, but very briefly, I'm going to introduce everybody. So first we have Doctora Brenda Abarca. She is born and raised in Julian, which has really amazing pies, but it's in the county of San Diego. So I wanted to say shout out to Julian because I know it's a very small but mighty space, and it's very known for its delicious pie. She attended UCLA for undergrad and medical school, and she's currently doing her psychiatry residency at Harbor UCLA Medical Center. So welcome. Dr. Jesus Torres, born and raised in Pacoima, attended UCLA as an undergrad, and his post-medical school fellowship was also at UCLA. He attended New York Medical College and successfully completed residency at UC San Francisco. Thank you for being here with us today. Dr. Othon Mena was born and raised in Central Mexico and came to California in the 7th grade. He is a triple Bruin, which is really dope to say, attended UCLA from undergrad all the way through medical school and completed residency at UCLA too. And last but not least, Dr. Omar Sagun, born and raised in the San Fernando Valley, went to UCLA for undergrad and completed medical school at Harvard, completed residency in Boston at Massachusetts General Hospital. Thank you for being here today. Really excited. I feel like I don't know much of your profession either, so please give me all the grace if I may miss a few of the pieces in the language. So I'm eager to hear how you will also be supporting me in monitoring this place too. So the first set of questions that I wanted us to all think through was just our brief introductions. If you could all go around and share all the incredible work that you've done through your entire professional, not your entire, but your professional journey, the important highlights that you would like to share out, and also just the medical sector that you're currently in, and how you decided to choose that specific sector. So I can hand it off to Doctora Brenda Abarca, and then you can just send it over to whoever else after that.
Yes, thank you, Amy and Magali, for the great introductions. So yeah, I'm a psychiatry resident here at Harbor UCLA. I'm in my 3rd year. And I'm actually going to child psychiatry. I'm really passionate about working with young adults and children. I think after that fellowship, I still want to do another fellowship in forensic psychiatry. I think overall, psychiatry in general is so fulfilling for me. And the way that I got into it was that, early on at UCLA, I was part of Chicanos for Community Medicine, and I realized the importance of mental health, especially in, when patients were handling their chronic diseases such as diabetes, high levels of cholesterol, and so on and so forth. Based on their mental health, they really dictated how well they could take care of themselves. And for me, it's a form of social justice, being able to attend to people's mental health, giving them the best quality of life. And here at Harbor, I'm very fortunate to see a lot of Spanish-speaking individuals. I'm very passionate about that. That way, I'm Spanish-speaking, I can provide the services in Spanish. And I think that's been the most rewarding part for me.
Thank you for sharing that. And let's do Dr. Jesus Torres.
All right. Well, thank you for the introduction. I'm super happy to be here with everyone. As said previously, my name is Jesus Torres. I'm from Pacoima, which is in the San Fernando Valley, north of UCLA. Born and raised here. I'm first generation Mexican American, first generation student. He, his pronouns. I started off at community college. I'm a transfer student at LA Mission College. From there, I knew I wanted to study science and I wanted to do research. So I went from there, spent a couple of years at UCLA. Then I did 4 years off, which I was a research assistant at the emergency department at UCLA. I took those 4 years off for many reasons, a lot of personal challenges and family challenges, and that was during the economic downturn, so we had a lot of challenges. From there, I applied to medical school broadly, ended up in New York City. So I moved to the East Coast, did medical school there. I did my first master's and MPH at Harvard because I was interested in doing research mostly at the time. Then I trained in emergency medicine at UCSF and then came back to UCLA to do fellowships, 2 fellowships, one in health equity and the other one in health services research. So I focus now on the Latino community with social emergency medicine research and health services research and also clinical trials. And now I'm currently faculty at UCLA. Happy to be here.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you. And Dr. Mena.
Thank you for the invitation. Like you said, briefly, so I grew up in Mexico most of my childhood. And then when I came to the States, we lived in Roland Heights, out in by Diamond Bar and Pomona and all that. Then we moved to Chino. And so I lived in the Inland Empire too. I went to UCLA right out of high school. I knew I wanted to major in science, so I majored in physiological science. Along the way, I became pre-med. Then I stayed at UCLA with my best friend. And he, let's see, I didn't know what specialty I was going to go into. And then along the way, I did a fellowship in research, and I thought that pathology would be a good research kind of associated field. I thought I was going to work in a lab, but while doing pathology residency, you end up doing autopsies at the LA coroner office. And doing those autopsies, I thought it was an exciting field to enter. I could kind of hands-on field. And so I switched to forensics. So I did my forensics fellowship. That's the only thing I didn't do at UCLA. So other than residency and med school also, I did that in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Because it's a really good place to train. Let's see, and after that, I came back and lived 10 years in San Diego. So I know where Julian is. And then after San Diego, then I've been in Ventura County since that time. I'm the assistant chief here, and I've done lots of autopsies in my career. I think I'm at 5,000 or so. And let's see.
That's a lot. That's
Is.
a lot of bodies.
I've testified in court a lot of times, given lots of depositions, been to lots of death scenes. So that's kind of what I like about the field. And I wanted to say, while I was an undergrad, I was also in Chicanos for community medicine. I was a peer health counselor, and I had a little part-time job in payroll at the hospital. So
that's so interesting. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. I have so many questions about just what it's like to, do autopsies. Thank you for that. And last but not least, Dr. Sagun.
Well, first, thank you for having me. I'm glad I was invited and part of this panel. My name is Omar Sagun. I was born and raised in Los Angeles. I am one of 3, and by that I'm saying I'm a triplet. I got an identical twin brother that went to medical school with Oton, so that's how I know Oton. Oh. So at a very early age, I realized I didn't know what I wanted to go into, but sometime in high school, I joined the military in what they call the split option program. So in the 11th grade, I went off and did basic training in between the 11th and 12th in that summer, and then came back and finished my senior year of high school. And then after high school, I went off and did advanced individual training. And the training that I had in the military was out of a medic. They call it a 91 Bravo, but it's basically the equivalent of an EMT. And that really, really triggered my interest and my brother's interest in medicine. And that really what started this whole process. So spent time at UCLA. From UCLA, I went and spent the next 11 out of my 12 years in Boston. For those of you who haven't visited Boston, it's a beautiful city. So I did medical school, I did residency and a couple of fellowships. After finishing my training, I came back, and I've been back in Los Angeles now for about 10 years. I currently work for UCLA. I am a radiologist. I chose the field of radiology for many reasons, but probably one of the most important reasons is quality of life, which was really important to me. And then the second reason was, it's one of these fields that's always keeping up with, advancements in technology. Many people think of radiology as just looking at x-rays, and honestly, I that's the least thing that I do. There's MRI and CT and PET scans, and I do a lot of interventional work in my day-to-day practice. So I see a lot of patients for pain management issues, or if they need biopsies, or if they need drainages, anything of that sort. So I've been with UCLA for the past 6 years. My role has shifted a bit. I still do quite a bit of clinical work, but I'd probably say about 30 to 40% of my days filled with administrative work. UCLA has grown tremendously over the last 10 years. UCLA Health, that is. So radiology's got 10 outpatient imaging centers, and I'm involved in managing a lot of those centers.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. You shared so many fun details, and the one that keeps on coming back is a triplet. So what does your other sibling do if they're not in the medical field?
So the identical twin, he and I are, think alike in so many different things. So he's in medicine. He's an emergency medicine physician here in Los Angeles. And then the third one is a female. She's the smart one of the family. So she's doing some business stuff, but no medicine for her.
That's awesome. How fun. What a fun fact. Thank you so much for sharing. So there's already so many, to me, just understanding that medical school is just such a broad term. The four of you represent four completely different sectors in medicine. And I think that already is a really great start to the conversation. So thank you. All right. So acknowledging all of the experiences that you've encountered in your journey so far, I'm really curious to hear what you would identify as the most challenging experience in your journey. And I'm sure you could probably identify like 100, but what comes to mind when you think of the most challenging, but in that same sentiment through your professional journey, what would you say has been your most memorable? And it could range from your experiences in undergrad and envisioning this dream that now is like your reality, right? Or it could be as far as that experience in actual like residency, medical school, and thinking through that experience too. So whoever wants to start can start off the conversation.
I can start. So I will tell you probably the most challenging and most rewarding. I can probably speak to one instance that probably will encompass both. I moved away after undergrad, and I can tell you that was a very, very, very difficult experience and time in my life. I was a young kid, having grown up in Los Angeles, having family and friends around, but it was a calling that I couldn't say no to. I applied broadly to medical school and couldn't say no to Harvard. So in Harvard, when I got the acceptance letter, I said, I got to go there. So that was just a huge, huge accomplishment. And I had gone out and visited the campus and met some people and realized that it's where I wanted to be. But I'll tell you, for some of you who haven't moved away from home, especially if it's such a young age, it's a growing experience. Nowadays we're sitting here having a conversation over a Zoom. When I went to medical school, there wasn't Zoom. There wasn't FaceTime, there wasn't social media. It was picking up the phone and calling someone. And of course, that's never the same. So I can tell you that moving away from home was a growing experience, but it really made me grow as an individual. I became independent. I really was able to think outside of my own personal experiences. One of the conversations that I tend to have with a lot of people who never moved out is that they always are quick to say things about other people or other lives or how people lead their lives. And I tell you, you cannot be a judge of anything unless if you walk in somebody else's shoes. And I think that really, really helped me grow as an individual.
I love that. Thank you.
I think I'll add to that. I could not agree more with Omar. I took extra years before going to medical school. So I didn't go to medical school until I was 28. And then before that, I lived my entire life in LA, in the Valley. The furthest I went was UCLA. So then all of a sudden I got into medical school in New York City. And I had been to New York City once, and that was for my interview. So I showed up to New York City with one suitcase and like $1,000 in my pocket at JFK. And I didn't even know how to actually get to medical school, like where my campus was on the train. That led to a tremendous amount of growth and challenges, living in a whole new different environment, culture, the way everything, people speak food. But initially I felt that it was too much to handle in my first like 6 months of medical school. And I seriously thought that I probably wasn't meant to be there. But I pushed through and I challenged through, and now I look back, and I also spent 9 years away from LA, and I look back and I said, I tell myself, like, I grew so much, and I have so many experiences and stories that like I would never ever do it any other way. So both challenging to be thrown in a whole new different environment, but being able to succeed after being told almost in every corner no, or you can make it, or met with some sort of obstacle, but being able to challenge and go around it and be resilient is also what makes me feel that's been like one of my proudest accomplishment.
100%. And actually, I want to pause there for a second, because I think you both brought attention to the reality that folks will say that you're dreaming too big, right? Or you're aiming for something that is going to be so difficult. And I'm sure a lot of our mentees here, whenever they mention they want to become doctors, they too may be hearing that. So I'm curious to hear whether it's anybody else, but specifically I was thinking about you, Jesus, as you mentioned that. How did you stay grounded despite hearing, right, folks saying like, well, that's a really hard journey, or you're going to med school at 28, right? Like, how did you stay grounded?
Yeah, I heard everything, even from my closest loved ones to ex-girlfriend at the time. People will always try to challenge you and prevent you from achieving like very, very large dreams, and even yourself, right? You get a lot of imposter syndrome. But the way I kind of see that is I get more motivated when I am challenged, and I get more motivated when people tell me no. So I get it's like I want to prove people or prove things wrong, the system wrong, whatever. And I turn that negative energy into positive, and I just keep going. You have a vision, you have a big dream, you have to keep going towards the end, put everything on the table until you get there.
Absolutely. Thank you. Anybody else want to add anything to that sentiment before we go back to challenges and memorable, proudest moments? All right. Thank you. Dr. Abarca or Mena, if you would like to share maybe your proudest moment or your most challenging moment in that journey so far.
Yeah, I can share. I think the most challenging for me, honestly, have been just sometimes like the imposter syndrome, and kind of going back to like, believing that you can do it. I remember in undergrad, not really telling many of the people I was surrounded by that I was pre-med, because right away, kind of like Jesus was saying, people would sometimes discourage you. So I felt like it was more personal. I kept it to myself because I didn't want to be discouraged. But then as I went along, the imposter syndrome improved, and I think in residency, it's been, more at bay. But even in medical school, it always felt like a catching up game at sometimes. And, you just have to be kind to yourself and remind yourself that, you're A to B, from point A to B. You've come a very long way. And sometimes you can't compare yourself with people that have had tutors throughout their lives, so on and so forth. And you just have to be kind and proud of yourself, right? Because many times it felt like you had to work extra hard, and many times, your mind plays tricks on you. You're like, well, should I really be here? But at the end of the day, you just have to remind yourself, I think I'm going to be the best doctor for the community that I'm passionate about serving, which is like low income, low resource, or whoever that is, right? And I think on the flip side, that has been the most rewarding, when patients are like, oh, wow, you're the first Spanish speaking Latina that I meet, or it's so nice. It's the first time I share this with somebody else, and I feel like a weight is lifted off my shoulders, and it's just so empowering. So it's been hard. It hasn't been an easy journey. It's different for everybody. But it's been so rewarding. There's not one day that I'm not like thanking God that, you know, I get to do this every day as my job.
Right. Wow. Thank you for that. That was so, you made me think of my mom. She always comes back home from Kaiser. She lives there. And she's always like, es que el doctor habla español. And I'm just like so in love with the fact that they understand me. And I'm like, okay, girl, yes, I hear that. You're right. Like, right. Like it's something that I can't necessarily identify with because I am English speaking, right? But it's something that for her, it's just so wholesome for her to feel like someone that looks like her understands her language. She doesn't need an interpreter. Is there just giving her a basic assessment of her health needs. And I think just hearing you say that reaffirms the value of having all four of you in those positions. So thanks for sharing that. And Dr. Mena.
You know, you saying that right now reminded me. I just went with my dad to his doctor appointment on Friday, and he's always telling me, oh, he's the doctor is a Caucasian, but he speaks Spanish kind of broken. And he told me before that, you know, he's kind of rude sometimes. He does not very patient. And then when I went with him, you know, told him, of course, that, hey, I'm a doctor and all that. After he leaves, he says, I never seen him that nice, that patient, that talkative. So, but anyway, so that's another thing we got to deal with. But let's see. So part of the hardest thing for me, and maybe it's also due to having stayed near my family for that many years, was prioritizing and saying no to family activities. You know, in undergrad, I made the mistake of going home every single weekend, and then I kept getting behind. Then by the time I was in med school, I was kind of seeing my parents probably only every 2 or 3 weeks. I told them I just can't. So of course my mom started freezing food and then giving it to me so I could have it in the fridge and then just thaw it and microwave it. So the biggest challenge was prioritizing and just knowing that you have to study, setting the time aside. As far as career, in my career, not just the journey, the hardest thing is talking to people who's because I do forensics, who just had somebody die and explain what I found, and you know, so that actually you kind of get used to and you learn to do it, you know, giving bad news. So the hardest thing is actually because I see the decedent, the person who died, and I examine them, so I don't really get to know them. But it's when the families start telling me things about them and who they were, what they did, that those are the most memorable deaths that I've examined, when they tell me how they were to their spouse, how they were to their kids. And it makes me really sad. And it's actually kind of a burden that you can only release when you talk to other people who do what you do. So it's you know, I get sad hearing that what happened, but you end up learning, and they don't teach you how to deal with this during fellowship or residency. You kind of just learn doing it. So that's the hardest part about what I do. And then I'm thankful that I don't do the actual death notifications. The investigators do that. So they actually go to people's homes and tell them that somebody died that they didn't know had died. So the next of kin. So that's.
I'm curious to ask a follow-up question. Has that experience in being that up close and personal to death and grief, has that shifted any of your values or perspectives on your own personal life?
It has. I mean, not every day. I'm not aware of it every day, but I do see. I mean, I probably take less risks. Advise my kids and my family to take less risks. For sure, I avoid driving late on a weekend. You know, they say that nothing good happens after a certain time.
Right.
So, but yeah, I mean, prioritizing and making sure that the time is well spent with loved ones.
Thank you for that. Do you want to share your proudest or most memorable?
Oh, I mean, I guess getting into med school and all that, but let's see. Oh, during medical school, so I was deciding between going to the East Coast or staying at UCLA, and for personal reasons, I stayed at UCLA, and you know, all that, and then plus it's a great school. So I met my wife during medical school. So have I not, I would not have met. I probably, I'm sure married to somebody else. But I met her while doing a rotation at Cedars-Sinai, my very first clinical rotation. I met her, we dated, got married about 3.5 years later, and we just had our 20th anniversary.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you. We all love a good love story.
Thanks. Well, it's not always perfect, but mostly good.
And that'll be for the end. How do you keep a marriage for 20 years? Thank you for that. I want to remind our mentees, we will be reaching the Q&A in a bit. So if you have any questions that are brewing and you want to make sure that you remember them, feel free to just put them in the chat, or I do ask that you be ready to ask out in a little bit. All right, so for our final round of questions, I want you to think back to all the versions of who you have been from beginning to end in undergrad all the way to this very moment. But specifically thinking about your younger self. And that could be Dr. Abarca at 18, that could be Dr. Sagun at 21, whatever phase of your life that you want to think of, but your younger self. Knowing what you know now about the journey, what is a piece of advice that you would give yourself?
I can start off if you guys want me to. So I will tell you, I wouldn't change anything. When I was a kid, and by a kid meaning up until probably the age of 18 or 19, I was really into not so many good things. I got myself into a lot of trouble. And, going through my earlier life, I thought, God, why in the world did I get involved in those situations? I wish I could have changed that. Maybe it would have pushed me in a different direction. Looking back at now, 20 to 25 years later, I wouldn't change a thing. And I think about this every so often. I am who I am today because of my past experiences. Knowing what I had gone through before and growing from those experiences, has made me the individual that I am today. I am a, married man. I've got 2 beautiful kids. I've got a wonderful career. I got my health. I've got everything that I could want. So I honestly wouldn't change a thing. Could I have done things differently? Absolutely. But you learn a lot from your experiences, right? I mean, I will tell you, I got many family members and one brother who will have these holiday parties, or he'll have get-togethers, and somebody will say, "Keep the kids away from the hot coffee." And and my brother will say, "Let the coffee spill on them; they'll learn from it." And he says that in a loving way, meaning you're only going to learn what you did wrong by actually being experiencing certain things. So I will tell you that there's many things that I wish I could change when I was younger, but I'm perfectly happy with the individual I've become today based on those experiences.
I love that. Then I guess let me twist the question a little bit, just because I'm curious to hear, what would you say was your mantra when you were younger, trying to pursue the career and ultimately the life that you have now?
Yeah, so my brother and I are extremely close. I come from a family of 5, so I'm a triplet. I've got a younger brother and I've got an older brother. He and I have always been extremely competitive and really just with each other. And I think that's what really pushed us, is that he was always trying to one-up me and I was trying to one-up him. And of course, it made it very easy because as identical twins, we share thoughts, we share many different similarities. So it was always easy to stay on track and try to push each other to do better. I grew up in a single family household. My father died when I was 5 months old. So, there was a lot of trouble that I got myself into, especially being raised by a single parent. But he and I really kept each other in check. I mean, we might have, veered off, but knowing that we had each other really made it much more easy for us to be successful in life.
Wow, that's incredible. Your mom must be so proud, especially having 2 doctores in the family. That's awesome. Thank you.
Omar and his twin brother are the same, but I've played both of them in racquetball, and Omar plays lefty and his brother plays righty for some reason, and Omar's the better one and harder to beat. I don't think I've ever beat him.
It's a good thing this is being recorded, and I'll share it with him.
Are you a lefty? I'm curious now.
So born first, full left-handed. My brother was born second, and he's ambidextrous, does certain things left and other things right. And then my sister was born last, and she's full right-handed.
Oh my God. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm a lefty too. I'm biased. Okay. Thank you. Dr. Minna, I would love to hear from you. What advice would you give your younger self if you could go back in time?
Yeah, so these aren't regrets, but there are advices that thinking back, so I did everything like right out of high school, right out of undergrad, med school, just kind of went straight, started med school. I was 21. I'm a little on the younger side. So looking back, I tell myself, what was the hurry? Well, why do, like, for example, in undergrad, I think you need like 180 units. I graduated with about 181, 182, something like that. I just never took a class that didn't count to something. I majored in science, and now looking back, well, why not? Why could I not have taken just more classes out of interest, just to, hey, I want to know a little bit more about that topic, even if it doesn't count. So I just tell students, take whatever class is interesting. You don't have to be a science major. What I learned at undergrad, I ended up relearning in medical school to a greater depth. So I would like to know more about something else that's not so close to my field of expertise or practice. So, I mean, I wouldn't want to be like a history major or write a ton of papers or anything like that. But I would like to, majoring in something that's more like science adjacent, or so I could know or be an expert in something else, and probably would have or could have made me a more well-rounded doctor in some way. So there's no hurry, and just explore whatever you're good at, interested in, as long as you do the pre-med courses that you need to apply with.
I love that.
Yeah, that's the main advice I have.
That's funny. You said no papers, and the only science class that I ever took was an earthquakes prereq, and I died slowly in that class. It was hard, earthquakes. Thank you for sharing that. And Dr. Abarca.
So I would say, like same thing like everybody else. I don't regret anything in my undergrad at UCLA medical school, my master's, I've had a great experience at UCLA overall. Like I think I lived it up. I had a good balance. However, I think I would say something I would tell my younger self at age 18 going straight into UCLA, make sure you are consistent with things that are good for your mental health. For me, that would be the gym, my close friends, CCM, but just making sure you hold on to something that is like your, raft, or it feels like a raft, when things get really hard. Just take care of yourself and be kind to yourself once again. What else was I going to say? And I think my motto was always just show up, experience new things. I remember I always used to tell myself, stepping outside your comfort zone is what's going to make you grow. And there was times I was super uncomfortable, like being in those classes in South Campus where there's like 400 students and nobody looks like you, and you're the only one, and maybe sometimes you got the lowest grade on the curve, but just being like, somehow this is going to make me grow. I don't know right now. It sucks right now, but God has a plan, and similar to what Dr. Omar said, eventually it makes you a better doctor. You build this grit and resistance, and, it does get challenging, as you go through medical school and sometimes residency when you're, working with patients in real situations. But all these things from your past have prepared you. So I always like to tell myself, God has a plan and things will always work out.
I love that. Thank you. Because I think folks here can probably resonate that first time you got a D or a C, or sometimes even failing a class, and that shame and guilt that comes from that, because you think it's only me, but there actually might be somebody else in the space that can share a similar experience. And it's so less isolating when you hear that. So thank you for affirming that and reminding us of that. And Dr. Torres.
So I'll say a couple of things. When you are in college or in early stages of thinking about medical school, you're going to get a lot of people giving you advice. And a lot of people will become your de facto advisor like right away. And I had very good advisors. As a matter of fact, I had a very, very close, really good UCLA-based mentor that ultimately told me that I should not pursue a career in medicine. And I decided to apply without them knowing. So the point here that I'm trying to make is that if it's really in you, you should follow your own gut, despite even like the most prominent mentors. Just do it. You know, you have like nothing to lose. The other thing I wanted to say is I used to look back especially when I started medical school, and I'm like, I have so many years. Oh my God, you know, I'm going to sacrifice so much, sacrifice all these, you know, the carne asada couldn't make it because I was sitting in New York, right? And they'll send me pictures and, you know, it'll get me down and so forth, and all the sacrifice. And early on in medical school, we had like a professor tell us that our life will get better. And early on, I'm talking about within the first fall of medical school, I heard that, and I didn't believe it. And it actually got me kind of mad. I'm like, what do you mean? My life should be better now. But slowly and surely, the years pass by. And as the years pass by, you're sort of more integrated back to society. And now on the other side of all of this training, I could truly say it was 100% super worth it, and I would do it all over again. I think my career is very rewarding, and it's all the good things people talked about is actually true. I just give you a little bit of a sense. I work 8 days a month. I work 64 hours a month, and that's my full-time faculty position at UCLA. The rest of the time I do my research wherever in the world I want to do it at. And it's amazing.
Wow. Oh my God. I don't even know how to come back from that. I want that kind of schedule too. Wow. Okay. Well, you all transitioned really well. Dr. Torres, you got us right into the last and final question before we pass it over to our mentees for any Q&A. I guess just with that being said, as you think about the conversations today, and I know this could go on for hours, and I feel like I've learned a lot, and I have zero interest in going to medical school. I am very much happy as a social worker. But I would love to hear what you would, I guess your closing thoughts and words of wisdom to the folks that are in the space, to the folks that will review this recording. Any last thoughts that you have? I remember being at UCLA and having a really good friend who was very, very direct about, I'm going to become a doctor. And she was Latina, and she was very, very secure and confident in that sentiment. And it's really beautiful to now witness her from a distance in that world. Like you said, Dr. Torres, like almost dreaming, living her dream life by providing the level of care that she had always hoped to receive herself, right? And it's really cool for me because I have the privilege of texting her when I'm having a symptom of something. But it's also really nice to tell people like, yeah, one of my homegirls, Latina, first gen, is a doctora. And that's really awesome to also witness as a bystander. So really happy to have been able to share space and community with the four of you today. But any final thoughts on words of wisdom that you would love to hand off to our mentees that are here?
I guess I'll go again here. Well, one, follow your heart, follow your dreams, stay the course. Know that things will not be easy, and it happens to all of us. I mean, I still remember my days back at UCLA as an undergrad. I mean, I would hit it hard, and by hitting it hard, I mean for all of us that gone through medical school, I'm sure we all know the sacrifice. You know, spend like countless hours at Biomed or one of the other study sites there at UCLA. But know that there's going to be days where you just are not feeling it, and that doesn't mean that you're a quitter. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't follow your goals. It just means close your book, go out and watch a movie, and clear your mind. Because the more you go through this, the more you realize that this has become your life. I mean, speaking of what Jesus is talking about, I mean, I would have family members say, "Hey, are you coming over? It's so and so's birthday party. We're getting together," and it would hurt not to go. Of course, still hurts. It had hurt the first time and the 30th time, but you realize that just becomes part of your life, and the sacrifice that you're making to other people, it may be a huge sacrifice, but once you get into it, it just becomes you. So if you want something bad enough, realize that you can do it, and regardless of what people are telling you, just follow your own gut. Be resilient, be strong, and you'll come through at the end.
I love that. Thank you. Anyone else?
One thing I wanted to say is how sometimes you don't know how your work is gonna affect like those who watching, those who are for whom you're going to be an example. But and the reason I say that is it reminds me of a case that I did, or a person I examined back in San Diego. How what I was doing may seem minimal, but can mean so much. So to always doing a good, thorough job, no matter what, because you don't know what it's going to mean. So very briefly, this was a person who, I forget how he died. I think he just died of heart disease, kind of a man in his 60s. And when I did his exam, I noticed that his colon was actually very, very long, his large intestine. I thought, that's interesting. I wonder what that is. It had nothing to do with his death. But when I called the wife to let her know what he died of, after telling her, he had heart disease, which I think that's what it was, I said, by the way, he had a really, really long colon. I don't know why, but, and she says, well, what can that cause? I said, well, if having such a colon like that, I suppose it could cause constipation, the stool to go much longer. And then she started crying, kind of couldn't talk. And I said, why are you so sentimental? She said, you don't know what that means. All the years we were married, he always had trouble with his bowel movements this whole time. And I never knew why. He never knew why. And this means so much to now know that there was a reason why he had such a difficult time. It was difficulty he dealt with his whole life. So the point is that, you never know how you're going to affect somebody in your job and your work. And so just being, empathy and listening and, all that stuff. So.
Wow. Thank you so much for putting that in a full circle moment. Something so small can mean something so much to the other person receiving that information.
I would just say, take it day by day. It can be very overwhelming. I remember as a undergrad just thinking, wow, like in 12, 15 years, I'll be done. Like that's like a decade or so and a half, just take it day, week by week, month by month, and you'll see the progress slowly, and then I would say even as a resident, I'm not even attending yet, and I love my life, and yes, psychiatry has a nice life work balance, but like I am so happy. So it's definitely worth it. And where you can always reach out to us if you need any assistance with anything. We're always here for you guys.
And Dr. Torres, anything you want to close out with?
Yeah, so I've been in a lot of panels, both as a speaker and as a student. And as a student, I used to remember thinking like, oh wow, these 4 doctors here, they're so far away from me. They're so smart, And I used to think to myself, no, but no one really understands. Like I don't think I truly have it. I used to think that, and I was that person that would say, that was in a classroom that was like, no, like, trust me, I won't be able to make it. And I want to say you absolutely can, especially if I made it. If you really put everything you got down, you could do anything you want, including medicine. And really the only difference between us 4 and the students here is just time. It's really time and effort. And let the time pass by, and you will be on this panel in the next decade or so.
Wow, that's wild. That's when you frame it that way after what Dr. Abarca just said, I'm like, yeah, the time is going to go by regardless. And obviously it's just be present with the journey. And in 10 years, they will be the ones on this side of the panel. Thank you so much. So we are going to now transition over to any Q&A. Magali, if you could help me out, if you see anyone who is perhaps raising their hands with the reactions or anything, feel free to start the conversation, y'all.
Yeah, do any of our mentees have any questions for our panelists? This is your opportunity. Okay, we have one. What experience during your time at UCLA informed your decision to pursue medicine? This is from Annabelle Asensio.
Well, I guess I can answer what influenced. So when I started undergrad, my freshman year, I didn't know I was going to be pre-med. I knew I think it was undeclared life sciences. So I just knew I wanted to do something in science. And then my roommate ended up being a pre-med person. He eventually became a dentist, but that's kind of how I started exploring maybe medicine is something I want to do. And then when I joined CCM, we used to go about once a month down to Tijuana for some clinics with a doctor. I can't remember his name. We would drive down there, pick him up in Chula Vista, and then cross the border. And doing those free clinics down there, seeing how many people needed help and needed health care, probably pushed me the most to pursue a career something like this, like how you can be somewhat or try to be altruistic with your work, and then yeah, that's the one experience I can think of right now.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, my experience came right before I started college, but I think I used college really to hone in on what I wanted to do. I was in the military, and I actually spent a total of 18 years in the military, all reserve time. The only time I was actually deployed was, during wartime, spending no more than 3 or 4 months on multiple deployments. But during my junior year, or in between my junior and senior of high school, is when I realized that I wanted to pursue a career in medicine. And when I got to UCLA, I mean, I just really focused in on that. One of the things that I will tell you, for those of you who are pre-med now, don't be discouraged. I mean, there's so many cutthroat people at UCLA. I still remember taking these organic chemistry courses and some of these other classes, and you go and try to find notes, and somebody's actually ripped them out of the binder. You take an exam and you score a 32 on a curve, and it's very discouraging. But yeah, don't let that get you down. If you, like I had mentioned before, if this is something you really want to do, push yourself to get through this.
If I may interject that, UCLA, it is super cutthroat, so many pre-meds, but because of that, you have a good chance, given that UCLA is probably the largest, quote, supplier of medical students in the whole country. The most med students by school come from UCLA in the whole country.
Wow. I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from Helen Benitez. During your journey to a career in medicine, have you ever experienced discrimination for being Latino? If so, how did you deal with it?
I wanted to just pause and ask Dr. Torres, I know that you were going to unmute. Would you want to take this question, and then anyone else can take it after you?
Sure, I'll take this question. And I also want to point out that I posted a link to the PrEP program, pre-medical enrichment program, which I participated as a medical student and was at UCLA and was super transforming. Definitely a plug to check it out. I don't get paid by them. In terms of discrimination, I think I've witnessed discrimination upon myself and others throughout my career. You see it a lot in medicine, I would say. In one particular instance, I would say that I had a close friend that made comments about the only reason for me going to Harvard for my MPH was because I was Latino. And what I wanted to bring, the point that I wanted to make here is that you're going to hear these comments, you're going to have even from close friends. And what really you need to surround yourself is with like-minded people that are in the same track and have the same vision as you. And don't be afraid to cut out some people in your life that are preventing you from achieving your dream.
Wow. Thank you. Anyone else want to add to that? I imagine we can all agree in some way or another we've experienced racism or microaggressions in the field.
Sometimes you come across, not directly, but towards people like you, like when you're doing residency or in the hospital, you see the way maybe some doctors talk to or talk about certain patients, that maybe you understand better what's going on and maybe why a person is saying a certain thing a certain way. So I try to, when I'm aware of those situations, I've at least try to be an advocate for those people in the hospital and saying, maybe this is not what that means. Have you tried asking this or that? And that helps. And then you can also educate people. So some of that stuff is just cultural.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, you know, having said all this, we've all experienced microaggressions and acts of what may not be blatant racism, but things that you can see. I work for UCLA, and I will tell you, UCLA does a tremendous job making sure that this stuff just does not exist on campus. Um, we're very multicultural in the field of radiology. You know, we're always working towards increasing the number of people who don't exactly look the same, whether that may be sexual orientation, I mean, gender, where you come from, race. So it's not tolerated at UCLA, and I can't imagine it's tolerated in many other places. But of course, we all live in a non-perfect world. We just got to do the best to be successful and make sure that people treat you and others no different than they would treat their parents.
100%. Thank you for that.
And-
Dr. Abarca, just wanted to highlight if you've experienced anything, especially as a mujer in the field.
I mean, like everybody said, there's a lot of microaggressions here and there, but I think one thing that I would like to point out is sometimes like the structural racism or microaggressions, for example, like that you're on this side of it and you see people applying to residency or even medical school, and a lot of times, you know, the test scores are really heavily weighed. And I'm glad a lot of schools do the holistic approach, because that's so important, seeing the person as a whole and kind of like weighing the grit that they had from their point A to B. You know, somebody who grew up, let's say, in a trailer park like myself, and, you know, made it to medical school, so on and so forth, versus somebody who grew up in Beverly Hills, for example. That's what I mean from A to B. But I guess sometimes, like when you're on these admission committees, they weigh a lot, like for example, the STEP scores, the MCAT scores. And, you know, sometimes you just wonder, like, well, do they not see the whole picture? And that's what motivates me to, you know, keep pursuing higher education. And I hope that's what motivates you guys as well. You know, I'm sure you guys would do great on test scores, but that way, like, you guys can advocate for people who came from, you know, let's say disadvantaged backgrounds with a lot of psychosocial stressors, and maybe didn't have all the time to study for these tests and, you know, get the best scores, perfect scores. And I think that's where I see it the most. You know, sometimes people who are very deserving of certain spots, it goes to the person who had the most time to study. So I think that definitely needs to be changed. And that's why I encourage you guys, like, come to medicine, please.
Right. I love that. And we have one final question that I want to make sure we honor from Isabella. Any advice on building medical related experiences if we do not do pre-med in undergrad? And they're also thanking you for your time. But yeah, anyone want to take that one before we close out?
I mean, you can reach out at UCLA. There's plenty of offices there who are willing to team you up with, physicians in the field. I'd be more than happy to have somebody shadow me and follow me around and see what I do on a day-to-day basis. So, you know, my advice is just try to get involved one way or the other. UCLA has plenty of resources. I'm not quite sure. I could probably get this information and send it back to you, Amy. But I would say get a hold of the office at UCLA Healthcare and see if you're, can put you in contact with anyone in any particular field.
Absolutely.
Sometimes you can also go, for example, to the departments, especially the science departments, the offices, for example, the integrative and cell biology or physiology or whatever, and ask if they know of professors who need like a research associate or research assistant, you know, especially early in undergrad, where you can kind of start with really basic experiment or basic techniques, lab techniques, and then work your way up. They might take work study, and then so, you know, DNA lab or I don't know, I can't think right now, but any kind of, they might know of professors looking for extra help.
Absolutely. And then, of course, the Career Center is also a really huge resource at UCLA that will absolutely guide you down the right pathway for your areas of interest. Dr. Torres?
Yeah, and don't be afraid to send cold emails. I get them all the time, and I have a lot of students working on some of my projects. So feel free to reach out, or I put my email in the chat.
That was my last thing. So first and foremost, Actually, Dr. Abarca, anything you want to add to that question before I close out this space? So first and foremost, I just want to say thank you all for being here. My niece is actually pre-med. She's a first year at Howard. So I will be taking all this information and sending her y'all's emails to her. Because I think it's just really, for someone who's completely removed from the fields of medicine, it's been really informative just for me to hear about your journey. I know this is like, I feel like when one of us gets into med school, the whole raza got into med school. But I always say, like, when one of y'all made it, we all made it. So it makes me so proud to know that I got to spend the evening with 4 doctores. And I think it's just really powerful to also witness your journey and kind of hear you talk about it now futuristically. I remember too feeling all the imposter syndrome just through like the North Campus perspective. And sometimes I just have to like sit and witness my life. And I'm like, it actually turned out to be really beautiful. And in the moment of it all, I wish I would have told myself to slow down a little bit more. So thank you for really honoring that sentiment. But on behalf of ULA, I just want to say thank you so much for your time, your energy, your love, your passion.